Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Sallallahu sallam wa barak ala rasulillahi amma ba'd. Before we start with our second half, or second part of the first module, who can remind me of the most important benefits that we took? The most important things that we discussed. Hold on, Adam.
We talked about the three stages.
We talked about three stages of?
Compilation of hadith.
With regards to compilation of hadith, we read from the introduction of the book. We didn't get into the module. We didn't get into the English slideshow. We just read the introduction with regards to three stages regarding compilation of hadith, history of hadith compilation. The first of the three stages was what? The time of the Sahaba. Or even before then, you can say in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, with the Sahaba behaving with the, clear on that? Then afterwards came the time in which the Sahaba were alive, i.e. in history, a generation or a century or an era or a class is always going to do what? Overlap. Is always going to what? Overlap. You're alive and your father is also alive. Your father is a generation, correct? The son is also a what? But you coexist with each other. Is this not correct? Everyone understand this? So the Prophet ﷺ was alive, and also the Sahaba were there. When the Sahaba were alive, the Tabi'een were there. So the centuries or the generations always what? Overlap. Don't forget this. It's very important. It's very what? It's very important. This is also why, those who say that the timeline is based off of actual time, and not just class, but actual what? Time. 100 years, 200 years, everybody understand this as we explain. So we said in the time of the what? The companions. How many meanings does that have? Companion, prophet, companion, tabi. Everybody understand this? When Muhammad ﷺ was alive, that was the first stage and step of the what? Compilation of hadith. Everybody understand this? Did we get into what they did? How they did it? No, we just read the bulletin point, the point. When the Prophet ﷺ left, and the Prophet ﷺ, as we believe as Muslims, has passed away, and he was a human being. The Prophet ﷺ was a human being. He wasn't divine. He was not made from light. And the Prophet ﷺ, as Allah said, is a human being. Basharun mithlukum. I'm nothing but a human being like you are. We understand this? So we believe Muhammad ﷺ was born. We believe that he lived. And we also believe that he what? Died. According to the Quran. And according to the Sahaba. Let alone according to the Prophet ﷺ's hadiths. That's the correct aqeedah with regards to the Prophet ﷺ. And someone who says that the Prophet is still alive, there lies no doubt that statement is extremely dangerous and extremely erroneous. That's not right. Clear on this? So, when the Sahaba were living with Muhammad ﷺ, that was the initial stage and step of the what? Compilation of hadith. What did the companions do? What were their methods? What was available? We didn't what? We didn't reach that yet. Tayyib. When the Prophet ﷺ passed away, alayhi salatu wasalam, then a new batch of Muslims came about. And they were called tabi'un. People that were Muslims but never met Muhammad ﷺ. The companions also played a role in the compilation of hadith. What they did, how they acted, what they wrote down, what they passed on, So that's one generation that has how many tabs? 2. This is muhim jiddan to understand this. One generation has how many tabs? 2. Then the next generation also has how many? 2. The time of the tabi'een, in which all of the Sahaba were dead? No. Most of them passed away. And the dominant force of Muslims were the tabi'een. Who were their students? Who were the Muslims that came to learn from them? They were the atba' tabi'een, the followers of the followers. The successors of the successors. The students of the tabi'een. Did they meet the Sahaba? No, they never met the Sahaba. Everybody clear on this? So they're atba' tabi'een. So the tabi'un, what did they do in interacting with the Sahaba? What did the tabi'un do in reacting with the atba' tabi'een? Then the next generation, the followers of the tabi'een, they had a what? Clear on this or not? It always overlaps. Clear on this? So we mentioned in brief just 3 levels: the time of the Sahaba, the time of the Tabi'een, and then after that. Now, what else did we mention briefly?
How they used to travel to get hadith.
Rihla fi talab al-hadith, which is a chapter in itself and a major discussion. And inshallah, it's going to be a separate module by itself. Rihla fi talab al-hadith. Traveling to seek hadith. Where do you go? Where not to go? What to do? When are you allowed to go? What if your father and your mother says, no, you can't travel to go overseas and study hadith? That's an entire discussion by itself. And it is extremely important in the history of the compilation of the hadith. The traveling made it possible. طيب, khairan inshallah. What else did we mention briefly? We mentioned the importance of the sunnah, the status of the sunnah that we want to discuss. I.e., from the things that we're going to study in detail is the what? The status of the sunnah. That the sunnah has a very high status in Islam. Every single Muslim is to know that and to practice that. Now, tell you, what else did we mention briefly? Fadal akhi. The different positions of the people towards the sunnah. I.e., everyone wasn't from the Sahaba or the Tabi'een or the Atba' al-Tabi'een to listen, follow, record. It were other Muslims or people that said that they were Muslims, because that's a different issue of apostasy. Apostasy in a religion when someone is no longer a Muslim because of something that they say or do or believe or something that they're doubtful over. Those are the 4 reasons or ways of a Muslim, waliyadu billah, leaving the fold of Islam. Statement, action, belief, or doubt. Everybody clear on this? Our class right now is not on Aqidah, but this is important. There's either something that you state, that you say, I was joking, but you said it, you've left the fold of Islam. Unless you were coerced and forced to make that statement. Everybody understand this? Do you actually believe that in your heart? Doesn't matter. But you what? You said it. Everybody clear on this? Or if it's not a statement, then it's a what? An action, something that you did, but you didn't verbally state. And you weren't forced to do it. According to the Quran and the Sunnah, that act is a major act of kufr. You have left the fold of Islam. May Allah protect us from that. After action is a what? Something that you don't state. You don't talk about it. You don't tell nobody about it. You don't manifest it in your actions, but you actually believe it in your heart. Of kufr akbar. Everybody understand this? And that takes a person out the fold of Islam. Last but not least is a shak. Kufr shak is doubt. Something that you don't state. You don't do. You don't even believe it. But you are doubtful about it. Is the hereafter real or not? The person says, we're speaking in a third person. The person who says, I'm not what? I'm not sure. It's real. I'm not sure. He says, my belief about Jannah has been shaken through science. The Prophet Muhammad, he talked about silk brocade. He talked about cauldrons of wine. He talked about fine maidens. He talked about this. He talked about that. These are Persian legends. Legends of Persia. The different travelers, they would talk and romanticize about this Firdaus. Firdaus, paradise. Same word. Firdaus is also paradise. That's where he got it from. There's no real thing as Jannah. No. That's just a trick that he used to get his followers to spend their wealth and to give their lives. You have 70 maidens. You have wine. You have honey. You have milk. You have silk brocades. This is the fantasies of the Persians. If a person says, I don't believe that, but I don't necessarily reject that either. I don't know. I don't know. I studied in college. I studied science. I'm not sure about that. With his heart, then that person is no longer a Muslim. He's no longer a what? He's no longer a Muslim. He's left the fold of Islam because of the sheer act of what? Doubt about something which he is not allowed to have doubt about. It isn't something, an intricate detail. Is it permissible for a Muslim to eat with his left hand? Is it permissible for me to buy a house on mortgage? Is it permissible for something that's an intricate issue of fiqh? Or even some issues of creed that aren't known to every single Muslim. Intimate issues of creed that aren't known to what? Every single Muslim, or over which there's difference of opinion. Will everyone see Allah in the hereafter in the day of judgment? Or just the believers? Will the munafiqeen see Allah? He says, I'm not sure about that. The munafiqeen seeing Allah in Yawm al-Qiyamah? I don't know. I don't know. That's not the same as him saying, I don't know about Qiyamah. Everybody understand the difference? Everybody understand the difference or not? Every single Muslim, every scholar doesn't know every single intricate issue. Everybody understand this? There are certain things that are hidden to certain people. And a Muslim is no longer a non-Muslim for having doubt about those things. Everybody understand this? Something that is well known from the deen, established, known to every Muslim. And he says, I don't know about that. I'm not sure if there's actually paradise. I'm not sure about that. I believe in Islam in general, yes, but I don't know if there's an actual physical place called what? Jannah. Doubt. And any other issue that's well known from the issues of what? Of Islam. Not just Aqidah. Everybody understand this? Of issues of what? Islam. Everybody knows that. Certain things. Muslims are not to drink alcohol. That's well known to every Muslim. Unless you're extremely far and remote. Every Muslim knows basic things. So therefore, with that being said, whether they were Muslim or whether they were kuffar, they were saying that they were what? They're saying that they were Muslim. And they had different positions regarding the sunnah. Some did this, someone left, someone right, someone in the middle. We said there were how many groups? 3. The first group did what with the sunnah? Total rejecting. That's the proper way. Because the other 2 groups rejected it as well. But they did mutlaqan, absolute rejection. The second type was those who did what? Khabar ahad. Mutawatir hadith. What is a mutawatir hadith? We didn't get into that yet. We didn't explain that yet. They said we'll take the khabar, the mutawatir, but not khabar ahad. Thirdly was what? No, not out of the Quran. Ziyada ala nas. Ruddu alayya bita'ati. Give me back what I what? I gave you. I gave you something that was clear and plain. Don't give me something that's cloudy. Give me what I clearly explained to you. Ziyada ala nas. That which was what? Beyond the Quran. They rejected the hadiths which were what? Beyond the Quran. We made an example of this such as being married to a woman and having a second wife as her aunt. Is that mentioned in the Quran? It is not. Everybody understand this? Eating the flesh of an animal that has canine teeth, has incisors. Is that mentioned in the Quran? Ha kullu tayrin dhi mikhlab. Birds with talons. Is that mentioned in the Quran? It's mentioned where? In hadiths. So they said we accept the flesh, lahma khinzir, clearly in the Quran. And we'll also accept the hadith that says that you can't eat the flesh of lahma khinzir. But we will not accept the hadith that talks about birds that have talons. Everybody clear on this? Because that was only mentioned where? In the hadiths. That is ziyada ala nas. Yani an-nas al-Qur'ani. Everybody clear on this or not? Tayyip, what else did we mention briefly?
Hadith were written down in the first generation.
We said that there were hadiths written down in the first generation. Were all the hadiths written down? Were the main books compiled and organized, but there was actual documentation in the time of Muhammad, let alone the time of the Sahaba with the Tabi'in. Tayyip, next point, briefly. What else did we mention, guys? We need other participants. Second centuries, there were leaps that were made. There were steps and then what? Leaps. Major progression they made with regards to refining these studies or the compilation of hadith, writing them down, recording them, documenting them, classifying them. What is the most, this question is specifically for the sisters, what is the most important book of the 2nd century? The Muwatta of Malik. Very good. Tayyip. What else did we mention after that? The golden century. The what? Why was it called that? Because they had a lot of gold? They wore gold bangles and necklaces? They traded with gold. Why was it called the golden century? It's not what we said. It's not what we said. We never said that. Nope. Because all of Islamic scholarship reached its what? Peak at the 3rd generation. Let alone hadith. Remember clearness? Did it stop? No, it continued. But that was its what? The golden era, where the best of the best lived, and where the best of the best put out books. Everybody clear on this or not? That's what we said. That's what? That's what we said. Tayyip. What else did we mention? Briefly. A couple more minutes before we get started.
Different genres of hadith?
We never said different genres of hadith.
Hadith
Hadith books. Different genres of hadith books, such as a musnad or a jami' or sahih or sunan or, we never said mustadrak, not in the 3rd century. Musannaf, exactly. We said musannaf. Tayyib. Khairin, inshallah. What else did we talk about? Imam Ahmed and his what? His musnad, not his sunan. His what? How many hadiths are there in? Approximately. Always with the right hand, right? Tayyib. Khair, inshallah. All right, let's get started with this module, with this section, this session. Are there any questions about what we took before we move forward? Are there any questions? Okay, let's go back, inshallah, to the intro. Okay. The author, he says here, after he will lay this, the layout skeleton, the blueprint, he's going to speak on the Musnad of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, a brief study of the book. Then he says, Al-Fasl al-Thani, or Al-Fasl al-Thani, فيه دراسة موجزة جدا عن كل واحد من الكتب الستة المعروفة وأوجزت الدراسة فيها لأمرين. Then he's going to speak about, or we're going to learn and study and give you examples of each of the popular 6 books of hadith. Are there just 6 books of hadith? There are more than just 6. But these 6 are considered to be from the most important, from the most popular, from the most authentic, from the most significant and thorough. So we're going to take a brief study of the book of Imam al-Bukhari, a brief study of the book of Imam Ibn Majah. Who is Ibn Majah? What is Ibn Majah? What's Majah? Who was he? Where was he from? And what is his sunan? What's a sunan? That's what we're going to study as well. A brief study on each of those what? 6 books and their authors. Clear on this? Tayyib. And he mentions why he made it brief. Skipping that. He says, وَأَمَّا الْبَابُ الرَّابِعُ فَقَدْ ذَكَرْتُ فِيهِ التَّدْوِينَ فِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ الرَّابِعِ وَالْخَامِسِ وَذَلِكَ فِي فَصْلَيْنِ. He says, as for chapter number 4, then he mentioned the 4th and 5th century. The 4th century of the Hijrah and the 5th century. وَذَلِكَ فِي فَصْلَيْنِ. And he put that in 2 sections. Section number 1. عن التدوين في القرن الرابع الهجري وفيه فقرتان. الأولى تعريف موجز ببعض الكتب المدونة في السنة في هذا القرن وهي 7 كتب. He says in chapter number 4, we talk about century number 4 and 5. And we said the study of hadith and history is like what? Brown on rice. It's like what? Brown on rice. It goes what? Hand in hand. You can't separate the two. The study of hadith and also knowing what? History. The time. The people. And also another very important white on rice with hadith is what? Who can guess? Not science. Who can guess? Who can give an accurate guess? Geography. What? Geography. Where's Iran? If you don't know Iran, where Iran is, you're going to be lost. Where's Afghanistan? Where's Nishapur? Huh? When the ulama of Islam, they say, كان من علماء إفريقيا. He's from the scholars of Africa. What do they mean by that? Central Africa? South Africa? West Africa? Or do they mean a specific part of Africa? Everybody understand this when they say مذهب أهل المشرق وأهل المغرب. The scholars of the East and the scholars of the West. Are they talking about Britain, Scotland? What is meant by the West? And what is the border? The Mason-Dixon line of the East and the West. Everybody clear on this? That's very important. You have to know history. Where's Mesopotamia? Where's Iraq? You have to know Iran, Iraq. You have to know this stuff. Everybody understand this? You have to know geography to get a good taste of hadith, let alone to master it. You have to know what? Geography. You have to know your locations. You have to know your what? Locations, huh? In general, and the more detail of the locations that you know, the better you are in hadith science. Everybody clear on this? Where did Imam Bukhari come from? Where was Bukhara? Huh? Was he a Mongol? Is it Uzbekistan? Was he a Persian? Everybody understand this or not? Very important concept here. Moving forward, he says in the 4th and the 5th century, 2 main sections. The first, the most important books of the Sunnah in this century. And these are 7 books that we're going to study in detail. Number 1 is that which is called Sahih ibn Khuzaymah. I.e., we learn from this that Imam al-Bukhari wasn't the only person who compiled a Sahih. There are other books which are called Sahih. Imam Bukhari is most authentic, most famous, but he wasn't the only one. He wasn't what, Mahdi? He wasn't the only one. There are other scholars who wrote books of this genre called Sahih. Then after that we have that which is called Sahih ibn Hibban, the author says. There's another author who wrote a book in the Sahih genre, and that is Ibn Hibban. Number 3, now we have Al-Mustadrak, and not in the 3rd century. So if you were asked on the exam, give an example of a new genre of hadith book that appeared in the 4th century, you would say what? You would Sahih? Mustadrak. What is a Mustadrak? What does that mean? We'll take that bid'nai ta'ala. Afterwards, author says, number 4, Sharhu Mushkil al-Athar lit-Tahawi. There's a book which is called, in Arabic, Sharhu Mushkil al-Athar lit-Tahawi, which basically means in English, polemic narrations, problematic narrations, narrations which seem to be contradictory. They seem to clash. They seem to what? Clash. One hadith says go left, another hadith says go right. How is this? This is from the most important things to study about in our modern time in Western countries. The most important thing. Because the people that say that Muhammad's hadiths were all nonsense. They didn't make any sense. Islam is contradiction. I have experienced people who say that they're Muslim, and they say that the reason why I don't accept hadiths is because none of them make sense. One hadith says this, and another hadith says something totally different. Everybody understand this? And this proves that the hadiths were made up. And the Muslims, like we said once more about history, the Muslim countries are behind, prehistoric. The Muslims lack in science and medicine. They lack in issues of politics, military. They lack in so many things. And the reason why the Muslims were so traditional in accepting these hadiths is because they were mentally what? Regressed. They didn't have modern science like the Western countries have. They didn't have these major technological advancements like the Western countries had. And if they did, then the Muslims wouldn't accept these narrations which clearly prove superstition and folklore. When you go to sleep, Satan ties a knot at the back of your head. If you oversleep for Fajr, he urinates in your ear. This is a superstition. If you know about science, then you know there's no such thing as the angels that push the clouds. No, it's rain, there's snow in hell, precipitation. Clear science. Everybody saying this? These things that you believe in and accept are because of what? The Muslims are so what? Behind, intellectually. Everybody understand this? So that is why these hadiths have survived. But in the modern times, you have proof that these hadiths are all made up. And it's only the Quran. It's only the what? Not the Quran, the what? The Quran. Don't forget that. They're not going to say the Quran. It's only the Quran. Everybody understand this or not? And the proof that the hadiths are made up is because they what? So, the weak Muslim, unfortunately, the person is going to be a victim to this doubt. If he knew this, he wouldn't fall victim to that doubt. That there were scholars of Islam who wrote books on narrations which seemed to be polemic and contradictory, seemed over 1,000 years ago. There was no Oxford or Cambridge. There was no Harvard. There was no UPenn. There was no Orientalism over 1,000 years ago. The Muslim scholars were vigilant. They were aware that certain narrations could be misunderstood and misinterpreted. Everyone saying this? We talk about radicalization, radical Islam, radical terrorism, radical Islam. Huh? They say you read one hadith, go out and kill somebody in the street. You read one hadith, he who changes his religion, they kill him. Man baddala deenahu faqtuluhu. Anyone who changes his deen, cut off his head. They said this is the proof that Islam is dangerous, and we cannot allow people to practice Islam because they can just open up Sahih Bukhari and kill an infidel. Is this not the case? Is this not what it said today or not? In abundance by some people who said that they're Muslim. Were the Muslim scholars unaware of this? Were the Muslim scholars ignorant of this? No, they wrote books on these issues over what? 1,000 years ago of misunderstanding the Prophet's words. Everybody understand this? Misinterpreting the what? The Prophet's words. Misquoting the what? Everybody understand this or not? Over 1,000 years ago, there was a detailed science for hadiths which seem to contradict. Everybody understand this? Everybody got this or not? Everybody understand this or not? Right. So this is a book by Imam al-Tahawi, an Egyptian scholar of the 4th century. The great Hanafi scholar, al-Tahawi. He wrote a book called Sharh Mushkil al-Athar, and which he spoke on many narrations which seem to be problematic. Number 5, the 5th study is Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir li-Tabarani. Al-Mu'jam al-Kabir. We have a new genre. Number 4 is also a new genre as well. Kutub Mushkil al-Athar. Now, we have a new genre, and this genre is called what? The genre of Mu'jam. A Mu'jam. What is a Mu'jam? Is it a Sunan? It's a different type of what? Book. It's a different type of what? Book. It's a different genre. Everybody clear on this? This genre did not appear except in the 4th and 5th century. Not in the 3rd century. Moving forward. Number 6, a new book, Sunan ad-Daraqutni. Sunan ad-Daraqutni. Is the genre new?
No.
SubhanAllah. Is the genre new or old? It's old. When was the Sunan genre made? 3rd century. It's not new. But it's a new book by a new author. And that is Imam Daraqutni. Who remembers anything about Daraqutni from the Sound Heart Conference last year? Huh? Go ahead. What did we say about Daraqutni? I can't hear it. I'm sorry. Anybody else? We gave a whole lecture on Daraqutni last year. If you guys can't answer this question, I may not come to the Sound Heart Conference again. He was born in the what? 4th century. And what else did we say about him? No, we didn't say that. We gave a whole lecture on this Imam's life, and we can't remember anything about him. Why should I come to Canada, he said? Stay where? In America. Tayyib. Number 7. As-Sunan al-Kubra lil-Bayhaqi. We have another genre, which is a Sunan genre. Naam? Abdullah? No? Or yes? It's not a new genre. Sunan is what? Oh, but we have a new author. And this author is who? Daraqutni? Imam Bayhaqi. Who's Bayhaqi? This exotic sounding name, Bayhaq. Where was he from? What land was he from? And what was important about his book in the 4th century, 5th century, all of these different books. The 2nd section, he says, وَالْفَقْرَةُ الثَّانِيَةِ عَنْ كُتُبِ الْمُسْتَخْرَجَاتِ. He says, and then we have a new genre of hadith books, which is that which is called al-mustakhrajat. A book called Mustakhraj. Mustakhraj. We clearly mentioned yesterday, and we clearly gave a disclaimer yesterday, last night, that this series or this course or these modules, everything in it is not for everybody. So no one can say this is confusing, you're making my head hurt, I don't speak Arabic. We mentioned a disclaimer yesterday that there are certain things for what? Certain people. Certain things for what? Certain people. General benefit for all. Certain things in the middle for those who are a bit elite. And there are a few things for those who are what? Everybody clear on this? A bit high. We said this yesterday, right? So please, no one bear with us. And don't say, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Why are you talking about all of this fancy Arabic stuff? And we're in Canada. We clearly gave a disclaimer about this yesterday. Sah? Right or wrong? Right. So we have that which is called Kutub al-Mustakhrajat. Kutub al-Mustakhrajat. ما معنى المستخرج أصلا؟ وما أهمية الاستخراج؟ ومن أبرز من ألف في هذا النوع من أنواع كتب الحديث في هذا القرن الرابع والخامس. ما هو المستخرج؟ المستخرج مأخوذ من استخرج. طيب, moving forward. والفصل الثاني خصصته للتدوين في القرن الخامس الهجري. وقد اشتمل على موضوعين الأول ذكر أهم الكتب المؤلفة في الجمع بين الكتب الستة أو بعضها. And then he talks about the 5th century specifically now. All of those books were generally in the 4th. The next section of this chapter is the 5th century. And he talks about the most important books that did what? Total. This is all tadween, this is all evolution. We're talking about evolution of the hadith books. Books that were written originally? No. He's now talking about books that did further service to the previous books of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century, but specifically the 3rd century. He says here, Al-Kutub al-Sitta, the 6 mother books of hadith, or some of them such as the Sahihain. There were ulama who lived and died in the 5th century, and they did what? They took the Kutub al-Sitta and they what? Put them together as one piece. I.e., they didn't reinvent the wheel. They didn't make another wheel, but they just what? Refined it. Made variations of it. Everybody clear on this? They benefited from the efforts of the previous, and they carried on and they further developed the science. Everybody understand this? So we have Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. A scholar comes along and he says Sahih Bukhari is very long. It's cumbersome. It's burdensome. There are many repeated hadiths in Sahih Bukhari. And there are all types of nukat, ilmiya in Sahih Bukhari. Intricate, difficult things only a few people can get. And Sahih Muslim, kadhalik, is long, it's big, it's outstretched. So why can't I just summarize, trim, cut, and shave Bukhari and Muslim and put them what? Together. Such as Al-Lu'lu' wal-Marjan, Ascent. But that's not from this century, but that's the idea. It's to take the compilation of the two and put them what? Together. Al-Lu'lu' wal-Marjan fi matafaqa. Fahimtum? Everybody clear on this or not? Alright, now this is a very important book in English that comes from this concept. First and foremost, he says, وَالثَّانِي تَعْرِيفُ الْمُوجَزِ بِثَلَاثَةِ كُتُبٍ وَهِي أو here. 3 books he's going to discuss in this section. مَصَابِيحُ السُّنَّةِ لِلْبَغْوِ أَيْضًا. The first one is Sharh al-Sunnah. The book called what? Sharh al-Sunnah. Not of Barbahari, but of who? Al-Baghawi. Who's Al-Baghawi? Where did he live? Where was he from? That's his name. And he also wrote another book which is called Masabih al-Sunnah. That is the grandfather or the father of what book that's popular in English? Very popular book in English. Obviously, we have different groups of Muslims, different dawah calls. This group of Muslims, these are the books that they deal with. One hadith. What's the name of the book? Mishkat and Masabih. You never heard of this book in English? Have you never seen this book in English? You never walked in the masjid and seen Mishkat Masabih? Nobody? Nobody ever seen this book? Mishkat Masabih? You never heard of this book? Oh, that's sad. What about Muntakhab al-Hadith? No one ever heard of Muntakhab al-Hadith? It's okay, guys, if I'm not going to say you're Jama'at Tabligh. Have you ever heard of the book or not? Muntakhab al-Hadith, huh? Or another book, Fazal al-Amal. Very popular. This book is a household name. Mishkat Masabih is a very popular book. And this is one of the foundations of that book. Masabih al-Sunnah. He came along and wrote Mishkat al-Masabih. And this is very important with regards to seeking knowledge, is to learn where things come from. You can't understand today unless you have an idea of what? Everybody clear on this? Evolution of ilm, of science. How it started. Where did it come from? Everybody understand this or not? Clear on this? Tayyib. Number 3 is what? Jami' al-Usul. It's considered to be a jami', but it's not actually a jami'. It's a bit different. The book is called Jami' al-Usul. My scholar whose name was Ibn al-Athir. Moving forward. وَفِي الْبَابِ الْخَامِسِ تَكَلَّمْتُ عَنْ. He says in the 5th century I spoke about. Do you have a volunteer to read? A volunteer to read the Arabic? Anybody wish to volunteer to read the Arabic? Anybody want to read? Hishan? Bismillah.
وفي الباب الخامس تكلمت عن اتجاه تدوين بعض القرن الخامس هجري.
طيب, in the 5th chapter of the book, we're in chapter 5 now. He says, I spoke about ittijah tadween. What direction did the Muslims go in? with regards to Hadith Compilation, with regards to authoring books on Hadith? What direction did they go to? وَجَعَلْتُهُ مَهَدْتُ لَهُمَا فقرتين. طيب, he says here in chapter 5, he made two sections of chapter 5. And before he actually got into those two sections, he made a prologue. And that's when he spoke about the Islamic world, the condition of al-alam al-Islami, i.e. the Islamic countries, i.e. the what? The Islamic what? Countries. He says from the he says خلال القرون الأربعة, the first 4 centuries, he says من القرن الخامس. He's talking about 4 generations, starting with the 5th century up until the end of the 9th. What is he talking about here? And why is this even important? And it goes back to what I previously told you about history. And hadith is like what? Brown on rice. You have to know it. What was going on in the Muslim world in the 5th century up until the end of the 9th century? What was happening? The Mughals, whether they're Tatars or the Mongols, many Muslims were killed, slaughtered. What happened when those Muslims were killed? Books were burnt, books were destroyed. By clearing this, countless ulama were slain. Everybody understand this? That was a major blow to the Muslims in that time. And they were in Baghdad. What else was there? Quickly, guys. Where's the history heads at? This is important. Crusades. If you hesitate, when will you win? If you what? If you hesitate, when will you what? You can't hesitate. You think about it, do what? Say it. The worst that can happen is you're wrong. Everybody understand this? Trust your what? Instincts. Trust your what? Your instincts. The Crusades. What happened? How many Crusades were there? What happened? There was a major blow to the Muslims. The what? The Crusades. And many things that are happening today to the Muslim world are nothing more than a product of the Crusades. Everybody understand this? What else took place? The many other مآسي يعني هناك مآسي كثيرة في هذه القرون مثل يلا guys Ibn Taymiyyah. That's a good guess. He lived during those times. It's just one man. Show how important he was as a reviver. طيب, excellent. مبتدعة لم تكن مبتدعة قبل ولكن زادت شوكتهم قويت. The innovators in Islam, they became strong. They were there already, and there were even times in which they were strong in the 3rd century, like Imam Muhammad's time. Fitnat khalq al-Quran, هذا موجودة. But now the Mubtadi'ah, they began to swarm and increase, and they began to have a lot of power and influence, and they began to write more books, and they began to dominate many sciences. Al-Lugha al-Arabiya, the Quran, the Tafsir, the books of Mustalah, Hadith were written by people that were influenced with this bid'ah, with this falsafa, with this kalam. Tight. What else took place during this time? Very important. The Rafidah, regardless whether it's in Iran or Iraq, but the Rafidah became what? More popular, more hungry, start taking and controlling more, torturing more people, destroying more sources. What else took place during these centuries? Very important thing. Ash'ira, along the bid'ah, no question. They were there before, but this one they become what? The Ash'ira became the orthodox Sunnah. Ahlus Sunnah, Shafi'i, Madhab, Ash'ira, Al-Aqidah, Tasawwuf, and your Ibadah, and you either study Hadith or Fiqh or so on and so forth, Usul. And that was Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Everybody understand this? The people that were on the way of Imam Ahmed, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Kathir, this one and that one, they were like, on the side. They want the balance, the Sunnah Orthodox was what? Was the Ash'ira. And that has a major effect of what is going on today as well. What else took place during these centuries? Something else we're missing out on. Sufiya. Sufiya was old as well. They were old as well, but different direction of the Sufiya. The Sufiya of the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century are not like the Sufiya of the 6th and 7th century. There's a world of a difference. Everybody understand this is a what? A world of a difference. And you have to be just and fair when you speak with all of these different groups. You have to be just and you have to be what? Fair. The Sufiya of the 8th century are not like the Sufiya of the 4th or the 3rd century. Night and what? Day. The Ash'ari, the Ash'aris of the 10th century are not like the Ash'aris of the 4th century. They were different. They had different values. Everybody had what? Different values. Everybody understand this or not? What else? Falsafa, we mentioned that already about philosophy. There's something else. So this last thing I'll ask you. Qadri is Qadim, Khawarij Qadim. It's old. التعصب المذهبي والجمود جمود الفكر البعد عن الاجتهاد. The Muslims became extremely complacent with regards to being independent in their study of fiqh. And many of them, if not most of them during these generations, not all of them, they became pleased with being blind followers. They became what? Pleased with being what? The normal, the bed breaker in Baghdad, the shoemaker in Raqqa. No, we're talking about who? Ulama. The shoemaker in Baghdad is supposed to be a what? Ask the ulama. But the alim, he became what? Yakfina. Khalas. Khalas, it's over. Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, Malik, there's no reason for us to use our minds anymore. And not only did they become stuck mentally and intellectually, but they began to become extremely fanatical. And that's why we have today Hanafi, Shafi'i, that's extremely fanatical. My group is the only group. My madhab is the only madhab. My imam is superior. Everybody understand this or not? And they started fabricating hadiths and making up hadiths regarding supporting their madhab. Just like what happens today among the Dawah people. Only the mashayikh in this one country. You study with them, that's it. No one else. You study where? In Egypt? La. Balish. You studied in South Africa? No. You studied in Medina? No. You studied in Yemen? What city in Yemen, Hisham? Where did you go? If you didn't do here, it's exactly what's happening today, unfortunately. This ta'assub, fanaticism. That's not from the Sunnah, abadan. So this was a big, big problem during these what? These centuries. The scholars, many of them began to do what? Stop thinking critically. And this also had a major effect on the concept of the lands of the Muslims being conquered and colonized. Everybody understand this? In which we live in that shade to this day. To that what? To this day. Everybody understand this? Type. Moving forward, no more lessons on history. He then says here, Al-Ula an aham al-mihani wal-fitan التي واجهت المسلمين عموما وأهل السنة خصوصا. The first section of this prologue was pertaining to the greatest trials that the Muslims faced in general. Whether it was them being killed and slaughtered, or their books being destroyed, and even more dangerous than that, their ideology being tainted. That's the most dangerous thing. Everybody understand this? They can kill you, they can take your land. That comes, that goes. You win, you lose. But if the non-Muslims get you to change the way you think and look at Islam, that's ultimate victory. That's what? Ultimate victory. Everybody understand this? If they get the Muslims to think other than how they're supposed to think, their identity, what type of names they take, science, producing, exploring, all of that stuff. They got the Muslims to get out of that, and that's how they conquered them. Everybody understand this? That's how they what? It's how they conquered them. Moving forward, he says the Muslims in general, and specifically the what? Ahl Sunnah, such as the Rafidah, were killing the ulama of hadith, slaughtering them. Everybody understand this? Number 2, he says, وَالثَّانِيَةِ فَضَلْ هِشَام أَنْ جُهُودِ الْعُلَمَاءِ المنقذ انحرافات. He says the second section is speaking about the opposite. We're no longer talking about the disease and the cancer. خلصنا الكلام عن الداء والمشاكل والمآسي. الآن عن ليش؟ العلاج. He's now talking about the counter. All of the Muslims in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th century, they weren't sleeping. All of them were not pleased with what was going on. There were people that rebelled. There were what? There were revolutions. Scholastic what? revolutions surging or going against the surging tide. When the ulama of hadith, they fought back in front of these different fitan, and these mihan, these trials, these calamities. Such as, he said, the grave worship, the Mongols, the Crusades. Everybody on this or not? There was the ulama of hadith who did what? They didn't just submit to that, but they actually gave rejuvenation to the ummah. He says that after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they were the reason why the Muslims were rescued from the innovations, from the khurafat, superstitions. Listen carefully, Adam, he says, وَجَمِيعِ الْإِنْحِرَافَاتِ. He says, in all other acts of deviation. The Muslims began to become thinking that they were Europeans. The Muslims began to use this philosophy. The Muslims began to become what? Extremely luxurious. The kings, the sultans, whatever names they had, they began to become what? Extremely lavish. Extremely what? Lavish. The earlier leaders of the Muslims were the leaders of the Muslims, but they lived what? Simple, basic life. Simple what? Simple, basic life. They were the Muslims, they were the leaders in front of the Muslims, leading them, teaching them in battle and Hajj. But in these times, some of those leaders, the kings, they became what? Extremely lavish, spendthrifts, extravagant. Where's that money coming from? Bayt al-Mal. That's coming from the treasury of the Muslims. His luxury is coming from your labor. That's supposed to be spent on this, spent on that, spent on this, and spent on this. Everybody understand this? It was said there was a leader of the past. Allah, what generation he was in. My teacher, he told us this. He says that he fell in love with a woman. She was a noble woman, a noble Muslim woman who lived in another land. And he was in such deep love with her. He asked her father for hand in marriage. Of course, her father complied. And it was two different countries. Allah, what countries? There were two different countries. It is said, not two different cities. He said countries, that he ordered for a bed of roses, a trail of roses be made from her country to his doorstep, for her to walk and to tread to his house. How much money do you think it costs to furnish something like this? How much do roses cost now? They're not that expensive, but they're not that what? Cheap. How many rose buds do you need? How many petals to go from Toronto to Ottawa? How many? Let alone Canada to America. Everybody understand this? You get the idea we're trying to get into? Is that a bid'ah? No. Ahsan. That's not a what? It's not a bid'ah. Is that the non-Muslims killing the Muslims? No, but that's still considered what, Adam? Inhiraf. That's going against the jadda. The Muslims are straying from the what? The sirat al-mustaqim. Clearness? And this is very important to understand that deviation is not just pertaining to aqidah. It's not just pertaining to bid'ah, which is important and dangerous. No question about that. We don't differ on those values. We don't what? We do not differ on those what? Values. Man iftara alayna ghayra hadha fa alayhi la'natul muftareen. That's a lie. We don't differ on those values. But what we do differ on is restricting the speech about deviation only to these issues. You can deviate from the sirat al-mustaqim from what? Other avenues as well. Spending money. Allah says, وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِرَبِّهِ شَكُورًا. نعم. لا. شكورا. هذه القراءة صح شيخ حسن؟ وكان الشيطان لربه إيش؟ كفورا. So if you're a mubadhir, if you're spending, wasting money in extravagance, are you in the sirat al-mustaqim or not? You've made inhiraf, inharafta. A lot or little, percentage, 50, 30, al-muhim, inharafta. Everybody understand this? So these ulama in this century, they fought against anything that was against Allah and His Messenger's way. Fahimna? And it wasn't just bid'ah, it wasn't just war, it wasn't just this. Everybody clear this or not? Anything that was inhiraf, they were what? Against it. Physically, vocally, and if not, or what? Scholastically. And that's where you get your Ibn Taymiyyah from. And that's your Ibn Qayyim. That's your Ibn Kathir. That's your Ibn Abdul Hadi. That's your Mizzi. That's your Ibn Abd Izz al-Hanafi. That's your Ibn Rajab. Everybody clear this? That's why they talk about all of those things. You read in their books. Al-Franj. At-Tatar. The Muslims, they had lost their identity. They wanted to be like other people. Everybody understand this or not? Moving forward. He then says, أما الفصل الأول. We have a new volunteer to read. جزاك الله خير, Hisham. We have a new volunteer to read. Anyone else? تفضل. أما الفصل الأول عن الكتب Now, talking about century 5, century 6, century 7, and century 8, or century 6, 7, 8, and 9, there were new types of books that were made. There were new genres of books that were made. He says, موضوعات خاصة محدودة, books pertaining to a specific topic and exclusive to that specific topic. We didn't study it yet, but the Sahih genre is a specific topic or general topic. Specific or general? It's not specific. It's what? General. Sahih Bukhari talks about what? Dream interpretation. Talks about? Hajj, adab, wasiyah, wills, adab, how you dress, how you comb your hair, how you brush your teeth. Kullu shay. The Sunnah talk about what? Everything. The Muslim talks about what? Everything. Now the ulama in these centuries, they started making specific books on specific topics. Specific topics, and not just general genre anymore. From these books, that which is called, Fadal? Kutub al-Mawdu'at. The ulama of Islam, they wrote books talking about hadith fabrication. Hadith fabrication. Hadiths that were made up, hadiths that were lies, or hadiths that were severe inaccuracies. He's not an intentional liar, but he says something so horrible, and at the end of the day, it's the same as the intentional lie. Everybody understand this? So the scholars of Islam, they were totally unaware and they were ignorant of people lying on the Prophet? No, they weren't. So if you take this course and you do your own study, your own research, you'll realize that what the people say today is not true. The scholars of Islam were what? Bil mirsad. They were aware and vigilant of the reality of fabrication. So we don't need Goldzire or Shkhat to come and say that the hadiths are made up and fabricated. Everybody understand this? The fact that he says that there are certain hadiths which are fabricated proves that the other hadiths are what? Authentic. Everybody understand this? If I say from among you, I say these are the bad students, these are the worst of my students, that automatically proves what? Everybody understand this? So they started writing books on hadiths that were what? Fabricated. And that's going to be explained later. Bidnai ta'ala. What's mawdu'? Number 2. Kutub al-Ahkam. Books pertaining to halal and haram. Not aqidah, not tafsir, not ta'wil al-ru'ya, dream interpretation, not al-malahim wal-fitan, apocalyptic narrations. This rulings of what? Halal and haram. Such as Umdat al-Ahkam. Such as Bulugh Maram. Such as, what are the grandfathers of these books? These books are the great-grandchildren. They're bigger books. No. La. Huh? This is an example of a question for what? This is an example of a question for what? للمتفوقين. تفضل. نيل الأوتار. هذا كتاب شرح يا أخي. نيل الأوتار في شرحه. لو حفظت العنوان لعرفت الجواب. منتقى الأخبار لمجد الدين ابن تيمية جد شيخ الإسلام. هذا له كتاب في الأحكام في الحلال والحرام. In other words, these were the mother books of Ahkam, not Sahihain, not Muwatta. La, we're done with that genre. That's hundreds of years in the past. Everybody understand this? There were ulama who wrote books on Ahkam, and then others, they came behind and they did what? لخصوا واختصروا. They summarized those books, and that's where you get your Bulugh al-Maram from. Clear on this? Moving forward. Kutub al-Gharib. There were books that were made on the vocabulary of the Prophet ﷺ's hadiths. Oftentimes the Prophet he used certain words in which certain people couldn't understand. Not all, and not all the time. So certain people at certain times. The Prophet's speech was clear and lucid. But this is also pertaining to history, and it's also pertaining to a major social problem that the Muslims faced, and that was the Arab tongue versus the non-Arab tongue. And we didn't say Arab genealogy or blood, but we said the what? The tongue. The what? The tongue. And it's also from the plots of the non-Muslims who invaded and conquered the Muslim lands as well. We can get the Muslims to be ignorant of the Quran through language. If we can get them to speak slang, darija, amiya, then we can get their minds to be weak. You can't understand what Allah is saying. I can easily make up my own interpretation. There's certain mistakes that you'll be prevented and protected from just because of what? Language, lugha, understanding the language. Everybody understand this? And the same applies to English as well. Certain words that you know, no one can come and say it means something else. It doesn't mean that. What are you talking about? So the ulama of Islam, they also combated this problem as well. And they wrote books that dealt with the scholastic vocabulary of the Prophet's speech. Al-Gharib, Kutub, Al-Gharib, such as? Huh? La, ya mashayikh. Huh? Such as? طيب, moving forward. After that, the author says, والفصل الثاني عن كتب الموضوعات الشاملة العامة مثل كتب الأطراف والتخريج والزوائد والمجاميع ونحوها. He says here, in the second section of the last chapter, are the books that talked about general topics, encyclopedic, and totally mawsu'iyah, books that were totally thorough, that were also summarized or summarizations or summaries, and compilations from the previous books. He says, Kutub al-Atraf, At-Tarf, the beginning of the hadith. إذا جاء, or مثلا, for example, hadith, for example, ma'aba an-nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And the whole hadith isn't mentioned, but just the taraf, the first part of the hadith, ... And it shows you where to find it. Or a takhrij, the referencing of the hadith. You're reading a book, let's say, Ibn Kathir. And in that book, Ibn Kathir, he mentions a hadith. Where is this hadith originally found? Ibn Kathir's book is not an original what? Masdar. It's not an original hadith book. He's quoting from other sources. They made books to support what? Other books. Was Zawaid. They made books, they put together books in which there were supplementary narrations that weren't found in the other main books. Kutub al-Ashara, Kutub al-Sitta, Kutub al-Tis'a, Al-Kutub al-Thamaniya, Al-Masanid al-Thamaniya. Naam. هذا يسمى الزوائد. هذا يسمى إيش؟ الزوائد. Oh, study that inshallah. And also al-Majami', plural of Majmu'. The author then says, وَلَعَلَّهُ بِهَذَا الْبَيَانِ الْمُوجَزِ عَمَّا تَضَمَّنُهُ هَذَا الْكِتَابِ يتبين المراد من العنوان تدوين السنة النبوية نشأته وتطوره. He says, and perhaps, listen carefully, with this bayan mujaz, this short summary that we just gave you, he says, بِإِذْنِ ta'ala, the topic, the subject matter of the book is what? Clear on what we mean by tadween of the sunnah, tadween of hadith. Everybody got this? This basic general layout should make it clear what the course is going to be about. And we gave you much, much more. Much more than what's just mentioned in the introduction. Everybody clear on this? He says, وَبَعْد فهذا تلخيص موجز لتلك الجهود الخيرة المباركة التي قدمها سلفنا الصالح عبر عصوره المختلفة في خدمة الإسلام عموما والسنة المطهرة على وجه الخصوص. He says to proceed, this is nothing more. He says a simple brief summary of those magnificent feats. Tremendous efforts that were put forth by our righteous ancestors in the different generations, the different centuries, and the different countries. Everybody understand this? For us to take pride in this, guys. Us to do what? Naftakhir. To be proud of our legacy, of what the scholars of Islam did way before the other civilizations had anything like this, and even to this day. And this is very important to understand dawah. Okay, what happened to Christianity? What happened to Catholicism? Why did it turn into what it turned into? Because there was no what? There wasn't this. There was no science of grading, of verifying. So you can put in whatever you want and you can take out what? Whatever you wanted. Everybody understand this? And this is why when I was in the College of Hadith and I was about to graduate and I was thinking about doing the master's program, alhamdulillah, there was no second doubt what I wanted to do. I wanted to do Hadith. And you may not believe this, but it's a true story. I had many teachers and many mashayikh who tried to discourage me. And they said, don't go to the master's program in hadith. Dakatira, doctors. They said, don't. They said, your country doesn't need this. Your country doesn't need this. They said, you're wasting your time studying hadith in detail. You're living in America in the West. Well, Allah Al-Azim, many teachers. And it's not derogatory. Don't take it as a derogatory thing. It's a point that I'm trying to show you. Many of them, not all of them, they would say, why should you study hadith? You know the basics, khalas. There's no need for you to have detailed science, a master's degree in hadith sciences and the books. It says there's no faida. He said your people there, they need to know the basic aqidah, basic dawah, and most importantly, fiqh and sharia. One professor said, go to Kulit al-Sharia. So obviously I had no intention of going to Kulit al-Sharia. I said to him, yeah, Sheikh, Kulit al-Sharia, they only take students that come from Sharia. He says, I'll write you a specific tazkiyah, we'll intercede for you. I said, Sheikh, no, I don't want that. Just write me the tazkiyah that I'm asking you for. I know what I want to do. And there were other students and brothers, colleagues, older than me, younger than me, that also tried to discourage me. Said, why are you going to Kulit Hadith Magister? What are you going to do with that stuff? It was a brother from the UK once. This is before the master's program. He got into the College of Hadith and he was about to quit. He was about to go to the College of Dawah. And anyone who's ever been to the Islamic University of Medina, and the truth is said, they know about the different wars between the colleges and what the people say. And they know how there's certain schools, certain colleges that have a very derogatory look towards other colleges. And they said this college is, and this college is, everybody understand this is well known. Hadith and Dawah is well known what they say. Even some of the teachers is well known about what they say and how they feel about other students from other colleges. In a good competitive manner, huh? So the brother, he was from the UK. He was driving on the Kulit Hadith. I said, why? Stay here. He said, Wallahi, he said, Akhi, he says, I can't teach my Christian grandmother about Imam al-Bukhari. He says, of no use my Christian grandmother hearing about the Manhaj Imam al-Bukhari fi kitabih sahih. So many brothers, many people, they had this look. And alhamdulillah, Allah Azza wa Jalla had guided me. I had total conviction that everything that they were saying, I did not agree with at all. And I would argue and debate with certain brothers and tell them, you studying hadith and mastering hadith is a major, 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 major tool in da'wah. And talking about aqidah and talking about theology and why you have to be a Muslim. An example of that is a Christian. Christian who believes in God. He's not an atheist. He believes in one God. He's a monotheist. Whether he believes in the Trinity or not. He could be a Unitarian, which there are many in my state, Pennsylvania. Many Unitarians. They don't believe in the Trinity. They say Trinity is a bid'ah. Paul made it up, Nicaea, whatever. Trinity is false. One God. He has no son. And Jesus was a messenger like Muhammad. Or they won't say that. Muhammad wasn't a messenger. Or they'll say he was only to the Arabs. Everybody understand this? Or they may say, I don't have to believe Muhammad. I have Jesus' message. Khalas. There's no need for me to accept your religion. Everybody understand this? So one of the ways you can give dawah to someone, whether they believe in the Trinity or not, they believe in God, they're a good Christian. Christian woman, she's not a fornicatress. They go to church, they give charity, they work hard, good, honest people. They may be better, they may have better akhlaq than some Muslims. Some Christians may have better akhlaq than what? Not all Muslims. Some Muslims. The Muslims who drink alcohol? Or not? In abundance or not? Muslims who get intoxicated, who smoke drugs? Muslims who cheat, who steal? Muslims who don't work? And there are Christians that don't do these bad things. So what would you say to this Christian? How would you get him to convert to Islam? You say, you love Jesus? He says, of course I love Jesus. He says, Jesus is the Son of God or Jesus is the Messenger of God. Okay, tell me about Jesus. What color was Jesus? Was he white? Was he black? Was he brown? Was he red? What was his hair like? Wool? Or was his hair fine and silky? Tell me about Jesus' description. How tall was he? What did his fingers look like? What was Jesus' favorite food? Give me the names of 3 of Jesus' disciples. Not all of them. Just what are the names of the disciples of Jesus? Where do they live? How many kids do they have? Give me a detailed description of the person that you love so much, but prove it scientifically. The most educated Christian is going to do what? What is he going to say? Yaqifu ha'iran. He's going to be what? I can't tell you that. I know general things. Some people say he was white. Some people say he was black. Some people say Christianity started in Ethiopia. Some people say it started in Bethlehem. Can't verify that. What are the name of Jesus' disciples? Maybe this one, maybe that one. Tell me all of them. I can tell you Abu Bakr Siddiq, Khattab, Uthman ibn Affan, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abu Hurairah, fulan. He had henna in his beard, he was this, he lived, he did this. I'll give you everything in detail about my prophet. He slept on this side, he ate this food, this was his favorite wife, this was his favorite sword, this was his favorite horse. I can give you intricate details of this prophet with science. And you can't give me no detailed information about your prophet with science. So what does that prove? That you need to be a what? You need to be a Muslim. Where can this knowledge be obtained? How can you get this mastery and this confidence except through what? Ilmul Hadith. The sanad, the athar, the narrations. So you mastering the narrations is a major leverage in dawah. And the average person, we didn't get into Buddhism, other ways of life. They don't have no type of detailed knowledge of their prophets and religious men. They have things that are passed down, things that just takharrus, which they think. This is what the religious men say. It's the interpretation of the disciples. We have every single aspect of life. I can provide you at least one hadith from Muhammad with the explanation, where the hadith can be found, how it was passed down, how it was preserved, how it was conserved. Let's make a bet. If I ask you, let's have a trivia question. Tell me about the fruits that Jesus liked, the meats that he liked. Give me any challenge you throw at me, I'll throw you back about Muhammad. The one who loses has to go to the other person's religion. Who's going to win? There's no question. The Christian's not even going to take that bet because he knows what? He can't do that. Can you have that knowledge, that confidence in a debate unless you have what? Hadith science. So this is one of the things that I would say to some of the brothers, not the teachers, because I don't want to argue with the teachers, and explain to them the vision that I had with regards to what? Ilm al-Hadith in my Western country. Khairan inshallah. So Ilm al-Hadith is Islam. That's the deen. Muhammad's way is the deen. Muhammad's way is the aqidah, is the akhlaq, is the politics. Everything is found in the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So with that being said, the author, he says those major efforts that were put forth in the different times and in different generations by our ulama, by our salaf. وفي الختام أحب أن أنبه على الأمور التالية. And then he goes on to say why he only dealt with the first 9 generations. And he mentions a few other things, the Ottoman Empire, the Shia, the Rafida, the different things, the Arabian Peninsula. He also talks about the Arabian, Ibn Abdul Wahhab, Ibn Qayyim, Ibn Taymiyyah, and all of these different things, these different revivers, these different reformists, and also the other people that made a great deal of corruption among the Muslims in the modern age as well. So this is a brief introduction to the book, one of the main books that we'll study. This won't be the only book. We'll have the modules as well in English, hopefully tomorrow or maybe the next session, inshallah ta'ala, along with the exams. And hopefully there'll be certificates and plaques of appreciation for those who do well and those who exert themselves. The author says, وَكَتَبُ مُحَمَّد بن مطر الزهراني في المدينة النبوية حرسها الله في 15 من شهر ربيع الأول من عام 1412 من هجرة المصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم. The author, he says, signing out Muhammad bin Matar al-Zahrani in Medina. This was the 15th day of Rabi' al-Awwal of 1412. What year are we in now? So how many years ago did he write the book? About clearness. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Jazakumullahu khairan. This will conclude our humble presentation of the first module, the layout of the first module. Inshallah ta'ala, make sure that everyone registers, the registration process, so you can get the necessary material. And also within that time, so you can get the necessary times, places for the online virtual learning. Bi-idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. If anybody has any questions or comments on the topic or off the topic, now is that time. And if not, I humbly ask you to allow me to go. Jazakumullahu khairan. Fadl ya akhi.